Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Security Confidential. We are really honored to have Ida Abdalkhani join us this morning. Ida is the CEO of Ability to Engage and the Chief Catalyzer at her company. She is a former global brand manager at Proctor Gamble. Ida has had some very interesting life experiences, and she is a laughter yoga coach as well. I think I got that right. At least I
Yes,
hope I
yes,
did, Ida.
yes.
So Ida, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and get to talk with you today.
And we talk a lot about personal development on this program from a career perspective because cybersecurity is such a growing area,
Mhm.
and it represents a huge opportunity for young people who are looking to get into a high growth place, or for even those folks who may be looking for a career change and are willing to put in the training and think a little differently, that
Mhm.
personal development is a big deal, and done right, I think it can yield very fruitful results. And
Great.
so, with that, I would like to learn a lot more about you. You know, how do you go? Just in the intro, global brand manager at Procter and Gamble, one of the world's largest companies, to the CEO of Ability to Engage. How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was completely unplanned. My journey just, evolved in a very natural way. So you mentioned, I went to Ohio State and my MBA was in strategy and marketing, and I'd interned at Procter and Gamble. And so, I went straight from the MBA program to P&G. I'd interned in the brand management department, and so I knew I wanted to do brand. I was super passionate, very excited about it. And I really loved P&G. I mean, P&G is a phenomenal company. I'm actually still involved with them. I'm on their board of directors for their alumni network. I mean, I loved P&G. The issue that came about for me was over time, I started to feel disenchanted with corporate America in general,
Okay.
and also just feeling this kind of angst as I started going into work. I was feeling unhappy when I was going into work. I used to be so excited. I would kind of bounce out of bed with lots of energy and excited for the day. And every day was different in brand management. It's like running a business. And so every day there was a new problem to solve. And I loved that. And P&G being such a big company, I had global roles, so I was dealing with different countries and different cultures and learning about brand management in different parts of the world. So it was interesting. It kept me very energized. But then after a point, after I think about 5 years or so into it, I started waking up and just starting to ask myself, can I do this for the rest of my life? So I think some of that newness factor had worn off. And even though the work was still interesting, I started to think longer term and started to ask myself if I could actually be happy doing this day in and day out, uh, kind of forevermore, right, for the rest of my career.
I
And the
think
answer,
most of America can relate to what you are saying right now. So please continue.
yes,
I think a
yeah,
lot of folks are thinking the same way. They may not even admit it to themselves, but
yeah,
certainly thinking the same ways. So
yeah,
please.
exactly. And so it happened for me early on in my career. I was in my late 20s. And I realized the answer for me was no. I mean, I couldn't see myself in that environment for the rest of my career. And it was not going to be a happy place for me forevermore. And I could have stayed longer, definitely, but it wasn't a forever type of thing. So once I realized that it was not the forever place for me, I knew that I had to make a change, but I had no idea really how to do that. With my MBA being in marketing and strategy, for me it was a really big upheaval. This idea of leaving P&G. I mean, P&G is the number one brand company in the world. So if I'm doing brand strategy and I love brand strategy, but I don't like the environment I'm in, like what do I do with that? So I started thinking, well, maybe I need to go back to school and like get a degree in something else, or maybe I need to go to nonprofit type of stuff and explore that world. Maybe I need to become a teacher. Both my parents were professors, so I started thinking about teaching. So, anyways, it was a pretty scary time in that sense, in that I really had no idea what the heck to do, and it felt like a very big upheaval. But for me, what helped me get through that was just knowing that I was using at least a process of elimination, which was that what I was doing was not working. And so that was enough for me to quit and turn in my resignation and say, I will figure it out. I don't know what the answer is, but I know what the answer isn't. And it's not continuing to stay in something that makes me unhappy. And so I turned in my resignation, and I had no job, you know. So it's always it's a funny thing to talk about sometimes, because usually people won't quit a job until they know what's
That's
next.
right. And that's a very gutsy move, right? And I would think your parents, being professors, which is a very secure place to be, did they relate well to that transition?
Not so well. I mean, they my dad's number one thing, I always joke about it, is he said, "What are you going to do for health insurance?" You know, that was his biggest thing, is like, if you know, you're too old to be on your parents' health insurance now, right? And you're not in school, and you are quitting your job. Like, what are you, that for him was such a big deal. And I was like, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll figure it out." But they did support me for sure once they really understood the unhappiness. I mean, no parent wants their child to be unhappy, right? Everybody
Absolutely.
wants their child to be happy. And so once they understood that, this was not just like a little hiccup of, oh, she doesn't like a project or a manager, you know what I mean? Like, this was a
Right.
much holistic type of thing. They were totally on board, very supportive. As was my brother. My brother, was actually one of my top supporters and encouragers, saying, Ida, you were an entrepreneur when you were a kid. Like, you're gonna figure this out. You have so many creative ideas, and he really encouraged me, which was fantastic. And so, anyways, long story short, I quit. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue what to do next, and so I was in a very blessed position. I recognize that not everybody can do this, but being in my late 20s, I had the ability to just take time off and not have to worry too much about things. I'd kind of planned out my mortgage payments and that kind of stuff in
Wow.
advance. And so I kind of had all of the financials put together for that, and it was just me, no kids, wasn't married. I could just take care of myself. So I recognize that puts me in a different position than a lot of people maybe thinking about leaving their jobs. You have other considerations sometimes. But I decided that was an opportunity for me to kind of explore, when would I have this chance again?
I can tell you, you're looking at one of those people because I left a very nice corporate role and
Mhm.
said, you know what? I'm going to go start a cybersecurity company with some of my friends.
Yeah,
Now, uh, at the young age of 47 or 48, where you have kids in college and,
yeah,
uh, you know, all the financial obligations that go along with that. And
yeah,
it was a very scary decision.
yes,
And
yep,
and I would be lying if I said it didn't cause angst, right?
mhm,
It's not one that you make lightly, so I can understand the emotional journey, and it is very much a journey because at some point you have to decide what it is that you're going to do with your life
yep,
for yourself, and it may work out, it may not, but if you don't take that chance, that's a big regret that one's going to have. And the reality of it is that once, at least in my case, once I dove into the deep end of the pool, um, there was a realization that a lot of life is lived in fear, right?
yes,
And a lot of the decisions that we make are based on fear,
yep,
fear of the unknown, you know, fear of what will happen if I do something wrong, fear of this and that, and
yes,
that all vanishes over time.
yes,
And you walk away and you turn back and look and say, you know what? I don't know why I waited so long to do all these things, but
yeah.
that's a little bit about my journey. But I can understand a little bit what you're saying.
Yeah, no, and it resonates. I mean, everything that you're saying resonates with me, that, we don't do a lot of things in life, not because we don't want to, but because we're scared to. And that, getting on the other side of fear is so important to be able to realize our dreams. Um, and that's something that I think is a, constant evolution for all of us throughout our life. As we get older, there's a psychological theory that says that we move from what's called promotion motivation to
Okay.
prevention motivation. I always recommend to people that if they are scared to take something new on, to take baby steps. Like, do something. If you're scared, if you have this big idea, let's say you want to start a new business and you're scared about quitting your job, getting capital funding, whatever it may be, to just kind of go all in on this dream of yours, is to start with smaller dreams and build your way there, build your confidence. I mean, of course, I'm a proponent of just jumping right in, but that
That's what
doesn't
you
work for
did.
everybody. Yeah, but that doesn't work for everybody. But I do think that a way to get there and build your way there is to take smaller steps, do things that are maybe a, what I would call like a smaller dream, one of those things that maybe has less risk, but still has some risk. And you get acclimated to this idea of, okay, it can work. It's okay, right? Or like you said, even if it doesn't work, you still learn something. And so you kind of create muscle memory in a way of how to work through fear. And then you can kind of get yourself to those bigger goals.
Yeah, to a degree, and this is just my personal opinion, I think security is somewhat of an illusion.
Hmm.
And, having worked for the last 30 years or so in a good chunk of that in corporate America, I do think security, I mean, you just look at what happens I've seen people who've worked for a company for 25 years and they got laid off and their
Yes.
lives absolutely fell apart. They didn't know what to do when that event happened
Mhm.
because they had always assumed that I'm going to have, today this is my routine. I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and any disruption in that uh, caused a massive shift in their thinking, and sometimes not for the better.
Right.
But if we start with the ideation that security is a bit of an illusion,
Hmm.
right, and build on that, if we could teach young people a little bit about that, you don't always, security is not, it's a state of mind, really. It's not a state of life.
Yep, I completely agree. I mean, one of the things that I always tell people when I speak is that you can absolutely fail at the things that you thought were completely secure, right? So just like your example of working at a company, right, and then getting laid off 25 years in, like having a corporate job or, being employed by somebody else, just as an example, since we're talking about business stuff here, does not really give you any added level of security versus going out on your own. In some ways, you could argue that going out on your own is more secure and that you're the one calling the shots. So you're in total control. You're not, having to look to somebody else to tell you what to do and if you have a job or not, right?
But
So,
now you're responsible,
yes,
right? And that's
yes,
a big thing.
it
Yeah, you're
is.
right. You were about to say, now you're not having to look at somebody else to tell you what to do, but when you
Yep,
make that decision, you can't blame somebody else for the
yes,
outcome. You're
all on
taking
you.
ownership. One thing that I came across when I watched your TED Talk was you talked about backpacking and that being somewhat of an experience for you. Can
Yep.
you, I've done backpacking, but in the forest, and I'm at home sleeping in my bed at night. So uh,
Yeah, this
that's
was
my
a very
definition of
different experience.
this.
Yeah,
Is yeah, I'm sure you're talking about a different. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that. How did that
yeah, so this
play?
was actually so after I quit my job, I mentioned that, I just had time off. I didn't have another job to go to. I didn't know what I was doing. When I quit, I didn't know I was going to become an entrepreneur. I didn't know that I was going to start ability to engage. And so what I did is I just, actually went to my bucket list. I have a bucket list written down and I started looking at all the things I said I wanted to accomplish or do in my life. And one of them on there was backpacking around the world. And I'm a very organized person. So in my list, I have, a table, it says the item, and then it even has a goal, like hopefully do this by certain age. And it said by the time I was 60. So my idea had always been, retire a little bit early and then backpack around the world.
Okay.
And as I was looking at my bucket list, I thought, why should I wait until I'm 60? I've got the time now, and who knows if I'll even be alive at 60? Who knows what the world, will bring? So let's do it. So I bought a one-way ticket to Europe and I went backpacking around the world for 8 months. I sold part of my PNG retirement fund, so that thank you PNG, they funded my backpacking trip. I took the penalties
Wow,
and all that.
are you a gambler? Because you really bet. This-
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there were a lot of people that told me not to, sell sell the retirement, because you do take penalties and all that kind of stuff when you're, under 59 and a half. But I wanted to travel and I wanted to make it happen. And so that helped fund me. And I went around the world basically until my money ran out, which was about 8 months. And I was able to go to 50 countries. And
Wow.
it was in that journey. So I spent time in Europe, the Middle East, South America, and Central America on that
Now, you
trip.
backpacked in the Middle East?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think our audience would find that, I find that interesting. Like, what part of the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, it was also during the Arab Spring, so I will say it was not necessarily the safest time to be going to some of those countries. There were some places that I could not visit because of things that were going on. But I went to, let's see, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, Oman. There's a few more. So I was there for about, I want to say 8 weeks, about 2 months. I went around and Bahrain. I forgot Bahrain. Yeah. So
Wow,
anyways,
that's incredible.
it was amazing. It was
And this was
absolutely
actually as a backpacker, like we see a lot of kids doing in Europe, where all they got is a backpack and they're walking or
Yeah,
taking the
much
train.
more difficult though in the Middle East. It doesn't have a backpacker infrastructure, right? So like Europe has all these hostels and you can get around everywhere with public transportation pretty easily. Um, South America was a little bit harder in terms of backpacking, but there was some stuff, there are hostels and things like that. The transportation was a little bit more difficult, but the hostel infrastructure was there. The Middle East, I mean, I didn't find any hostels, so I stayed in hotels. I also had a lot of friends that were working there, like friends from the US that were over in some of those countries. And so in the countries that I had friends, I would stay with friends. So it all worked out and it was an amazing experience. I'm Middle Eastern myself, and so for me, it very much actually felt like home. Cultural differences, of course, anywhere that you go, I mean,
Right.
even if you travel in the US, right? Parts of the US are very different from each other as you travel across
Absolutely.
the United
Yeah.
States. So there's a lot of differences as you travel from country to country, but in a lot of ways, also, there were similarities to my own culture. And so it felt also very much like I was at home in some ways. So it was an amazing experience everywhere that I went. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot.
What about South America? You mentioned that as well. That
Yeah,
I've never been, but I imagine as a backpacker, at least, there seems to be some very beautiful places to visit there. What
yeah.
was that experience like?
Yeah, it was amazing. I'd been to South America before in some previous travels, but this was, for me, I focused on new places. For me, this was a focus on exploration and learning new things. So I went to some different countries that I'd not been to before. I absolutely love the culture. It's a very hospitable way of life and way of being. So very much, I think also like my own culture, I'm Persian, and Middle Eastern culture tends to be very open, inviting, like have family over, have friends over, right? My house is your house type of thing. And South American culture is also very much like that. And so um, it felt very much like home too. I mean, that's the amazing thing. For me, traveling really showed me that we're all way more alike than we are different. That was a huge eye-opening insight for me. Because I think when you look at the media and you read things, in the news, and especially nowadays, right, there's a
Right,
lot of divisiveness. There's a lot of pitting people against each other. And traveling just really opened my eyes to how similar we all really are. And that actually was what gave me the idea for ability to engage, that we're more alike than we are different. And I wanted to focus on how can we bring those types of insights to companies doing targeting work, consumer audience type of work, and bridge that type of insight around kind of core motivational human understanding to brand strategy and innovation. So the backpacking
right.
actually got me to entrepreneurship and ability to engage. So it was kind of that free time of exploration where I just was like taking time off and had no agenda. But actually, through that is how I learned more about what felt right and what I wanted to do.
That is a journey none of us would have ever guessed. That interrelationship from backpacking to entrepreneurship. I
Yep.
would not have made that. It's not an obvious connection to make.
Yep.
But
Yep.
but if
Agreed.
we take that ideation that, to a large degree, entrepreneurship is a mindset, and you did something that exposed you to a different mindset and then capitalized on it. Uh, if backpacking is not your thing, then I guess we could achieve that in another different way. But that's a very cool
Absolutely.
journey. It's still a journey.
Yes, yes, exactly. And it was, I call it my eat, pray, love stage of life. If you're familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert's book or the
Yeah,
movie that's come out, because it really was just about exploration. So, it's not about the backpacking for me. My journey happened to be through backpacking and exploration of different cultures and different parts of the world. But, I think for anybody, the important thing is when you're at a transition in life, is just to give yourself some time to pause. We always want to move, I think, to the next thing. And that's kind of the way society um, trains us to think, is that what's next? What's next? And I'll be happy when we're often placing our happiness into the future. I'll be happy when I get this promotion. I'll be happy when I buy this house. I'll be happy when I go on
right.
this trip, right? But we should be happy now. And part of I think training ourselves to be able to be happy now is being able to slow down, to pause, and to really let ourselves have some time with our own thoughts, not constantly be surrounded by other people's thoughts and what society wants and what Instagram is saying, what the
Right.
news is saying. So even if for me, it was backpacking, but I do think it's achievable for anybody to create that pause in their life and to create that time with themselves, right? It can be taking a walk in the park and making sure that maybe you do that every day for 20 minutes, right? Or maybe you go once a week for an hour or whatever it might be, go camping, like just finding a way to carve out that time for yourself, I think is so important on the journey.
Disrupt the everyday patterns a little bit,
Yes.
and
Yes, exactly.
might give you a chance to look at things in a different light.
Yep. Yep.
At
I
least
agree.
that's a little bit of what I heard there. But and that's a very important concept. And you mentioned, we are happy when, that I think that is in itself a big problem statement. And
Mhm.
certainly anyone that's looking at changing their career or entrepreneurship or any kind of a major event, that attitude has to shift from I'll be happy when, because it's actually impossible to be happy when, because it's a future statement, right? And
Exactly.
neither
Yep.
you nor I can live in the future because we just live now, right? That's it's a catch 22 there. You can't live in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I recommend to people, if they're really struggling, if they've got a lot of barriers they're trying to overcome, and taking that next step, right, to be able to achieve a dream or trying to achieve that happiness more presently, right, more in the now. I do this for creative thinking. It's one of the key things that, so I also teach some courses at the university level around creativity and innovation thinking. And in those classes, I talk about this method, but it applies to life, and I've used it in my own life, and others, I've coached others on it as well,
Okay.
which is make a list of the three things you need to stop doing and the three things you need to start doing to get yourself closer to that dream or closer to whatever that goal might be. So if you have a goal of, living more presently, what are the three things you need to stop doing right now and the three things you need to start doing to enable that? Because a lot of times we get stuck with these artificial barriers, right? We say we can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. In reality, we can always work through any of those barriers. Those barriers are movable, or we can overcome them. Like, for example, this idea of me backpacking around the world. I can't tell you how many friends told me, like, when I first went upon that journey, they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. You're so lucky. I could never do that. I'm like, yeah, you can. Why couldn't you? Oh, well, I have a job. Quit. You can quit, right? I quit, right? Oh, well, even if I quit, I wouldn't have the money. Okay, well, maybe you can figure out a way, right? Maybe, like for me, I figured out a way by selling part of my retirement fund. That was not an obvious choice or answer, right? That is
Right.
one of the things that most people would say, I can't do that. I can't touch that. What is it for you in your life? Maybe it is, I'm going to stop getting my Starbucks coffee 5 days a week, and I will start to put that money towards a travel fund, right? So,
That actually could at $5 a pop, that's going to add up quite rapidly. So tell me, was there a surprising insight that you stumbled upon?
when I was traveling or in the
Yeah,
total
what?
like entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, that well, the work you're doing at Ability to Engage, was there some thought that came to mind? Was there an epiphany that happened in all these journeys that you took that
Yeah.
really
Yep.
changed the way you were running your company or the way you're promoting yourself? Or you tell me.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
curious. Was there a moment, that Thomas Edison moment? I know these thousand things don't work, but gosh darn it, I found that one thing that
Yeah, no,
does.
absolutely. I mean, you mentioned that, of course, for all of us, I think it's much easier to say live in the moment. It's much harder to actually do it, right? And I myself, here I am talking about it, but of course, I also kind of stumble and fall along that journey and start thinking about the future all the time. And one of the big ways that I did it, I'm much better about living in the present when I think about my personal life. Professionally, it's always been harder. Professionally, I am much more kind of thinking about the future, planning for the future. And what I found myself doing was getting frustrated when we wouldn't hit certain goals, right? At the beginning, you just, as an entrepreneur, I mean, there's just so many things that come at you. You can plan as much as you want, and there's always going to be something that happens that you didn't anticipate. And so what I learned was that I needed to just focus on this idea of progress, not so much on the outcomes. I can have the outcomes, I can plan, I can have the goals, but really focus on the journey and the progress. And so my mantra is be better than yesterday. It's a great mantra, I think, for me as an individual, but also for me as a businesswoman, is that every day I want to just make sure that I'm progressing our business at Ability to Engage, that I'm learning from the day before and pulling that into today to make ourselves a better organization, to make me a better person. So I would say that has kind of been my big aha, is that you don't have to solve the world's problems now. You've got time to do that. And so you really just have to focus on what can you change today and what have you learned from the day before to make it a better present moment.
There's that statistic that 90% of all startups fail. But there's also, I wonder how many of those startups that failed, or organizations or people that might say, well, I failed at that. How many of those people actually didn't finish the race? They were so close to the finish line, but they just said, forget it,
Right? Threw
just
in the
threw in the
towel.
towel. Yeah. And had they just stuck it out for another day, another
Yeah.
month, another minute,
Yeah.
they were so close yet so far, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, grit and perseverance, I mean, those are two of the most important things in entrepreneurship, is that, all entrepreneurs will be faced with adversity. I mean, it's just like impossible, I think, to not be
Right.
faced with that.
That's a given.
And yeah, it's a given. And so it really is about, I think the individual being able to persevere, and not throw in the towel and say, okay, I was knocked down, but I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to get back up. And I think you're right. That statistic is, um, not giving us the whole picture because
Right.
we don't know, how far in did people go? How much did they lean in? And, how long did they try to persevere before they kind of took themselves out of the race?
Exactly.
Agree?
Now you're teaching folks about innovation. How, I guess the question is, how can you teach innovation? Like,
Yeah.
how do you quote unquote force innovation? Or
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting, this idea of can you force it or not? I mean, I agree with you to an extent, right? You can't just tell somebody on command, give me a good idea, right? Give me an innovative idea. Some people can do it, right? Some people that maybe are more of a creative or right brain thinker might be able to just give you something off the cuff with no stimulus whatsoever. But for a lot of people, it's much more difficult. But I do think that anybody can learn how to be more innovative. So just like mathematics or, chemistry or any type of subject, innovation is also something that you can learn your way through. And what I mean by that is that there are exercises and things that we can do to help us kind of open up that right side of our brain, the more creative side of the brain, to start enabling ideas to flow. So an example of that, one of the things I teach in my course, and something that I do for some of our clients as well when we do design thinking or innovation sessions, is I talk about the idea of vertical thinking versus lateral thinking. And that's just a
okay,
concept that helps define different approaches to problem solving. And so vertical thinking is the idea that it is linear, right? It's vertical, it goes straight up. So if A, then B, if B, then C, right? You kind of go through this logical, rational route, and
okay,
that will get you to an answer. It'll get you to a solution. So with vertical thinking, typically when you have a problem, you come up with one answer because it's linear. A way to flip that is to simply say, okay, I don't want to think linearly. I'm going to relax linear thought. And that is called lateral thinking. Lateral
okay,
thinking is the idea of being divergent. And so you have a problem, same thing, you can start with one problem, but you will end up with lots of different possible solutions. Now, not all of the solutions are necessarily going to work or to apply to your situation, but what you do is by relaxing that linear thinking and saying, okay, I like, let's say with potato chips, an example might be vertical thinking would be coming out with different flavors.
okay,
And that's kind of like a rational, right, logical way, linear. I've already got my base of potato chips and I know how to make them. So my innovation is going to be flavors. I can proliferate a lot of different flavors.
okay,
Lateral thinking for potato chips might be, well, what could I do with the bag? Like, what if I kind of disassemble? I've got all these different pieces and parts, right? So maybe I can use those bags and I can make purses out of them, or I could make belts and clothing, or I could make a basket out of the bags. And then, okay, the chips themselves, well, what if I produce them in a different way? Like, what if I make a big tortilla shell, for a salad? What if I um, put the ingredients into cookies or come up with, a different variation? That would be more of lateral thinking, is not having to take that linear rational route of this is my frame of reference and so I'm going to innovate down a line, but I'm going to kind of break that frame of reference and say I can pull innovation from anywhere. Now, you're going to have a lot more ideas. And again, it doesn't mean that you use every idea. And some of them, like
right,
when I said about maybe putting chips in cookies, maybe you decide as the chip manufacturer, we don't want to get into cookies, right? We don't want to go that route.
right,
But you know what? We want to make baskets. We have all this extra, packaging that gets wasted every year. And we're going to use that packaging. We're going to start to produce baskets out of them, right? Like, so you get ideas that you wouldn't have gotten through the vertical thinking route. So, anyways, that's just one example. I do think that there are ways and there are exercises to get yourself to be more innovative. And just like any other subject, you have to practice. And the more you practice, the more then you will naturally start to think about these things on your own without needing a prompt or needing a facilitator to take you through it.
we follow blue ocean strategy, which, long story short, if somebody wants to read the 800 pages on this topic, they can, but we boil it down to something very simple. You need to create value innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So innovation can take many forms. It can be totally a new concept, new technology, new product. That's innovation. But you can also innovate on the existing with value innovation.
Hmm.
And we do that, when we look at, we have 1,500 competitors in North America. So that's a lot of competition. And differentiation for us is absolutely paramount to our success.
Hmm.
And people are like, well, you guys do cybersecurity. Well, so does everybody else. At a million foot level, that's a true statement. But how we do it is our secret sauce.
Yeah.
And as a result, the value we're able to offer our customers relative to 1,500 of our closest friends is
Hmm.
very different.
Yeah.
And right, and that for us, it was a bit of a painful journey to get to that, to not do the Me Too thing. Uh,
Hmm.
but I would imagine that what you're describing, this is not. You might get lucky and it could happen in a day, but sometimes, you, or a lot of times, failures might be your best friend on that journey because you're going to find out a lot of things that are not going to work when you're
Absolutely.
thinking laterally,
Yes.
right?
Yep, absolutely. And it's that process of elimination that's so important, just as I mentioned actually with me quitting my job. I didn't know what the answer was, but I knew what the answer wasn't. And that is often something that's overlooked. That process of elimination, learning what doesn't work, is just as important as learning what does work.
So changing gears just a little bit, a lot of what we've discussed, there's a seriousness to it, and you're also a laughter yoga course, which is the opposite of seriousness, or maybe it's very serious. And I actually tried the little exercise that you did in that TED talk, and
Yeah.
it is fascinating that if you're laughing for 2 minutes for no reason,
Yeah.
you're probably going to be laughing for a little bit. It's I didn't think that would be true, actually. I was very skeptical.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people are. Yeah. No,
But how did that come about? How did you what's the connection
yep.
with ability to engage, laughter yoga, uh, and the work that you're doing now?
Yep.
Give us
It's
the
a great
background.
question. Yeah, it's a great question because it's not an obvious connection and it happened very organically. So when I quit my job, I was also looking for ways to de-stress. I was, like I said, incredibly stressed out because it was a huge transition in my life and I had no clue what the heck I was doing next. And so I was actually looking for meditation and ways to de-stress. I
Okay.
was looking that kind of stuff up online. I ended up finding laughter yoga and I went to a class and I just went just to learn about it at the time. I was somebody who went to yoga classes and loved yoga. This was about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So laughter yoga was something I'd never heard about. So, I mean, even now it's something that a lot of people have no clue about. They've never heard of it. You can imagine 10 years ago, it was really kind of unknown. But I went because I like yoga and I showed up. I had like a yoga mat and the teacher was like, oh, you can put that in the corner. You don't need that. It was totally not, like a typical yoga session as we think about it today. It is laughing as an exercise. And so I ended up doing the, full hour there for my first session. Absolutely loved it. I was just, at first kind of thinking like, what the heck did I get myself into? Like, these people are crazy. Like, this is like so awkward. I
Oh,
think
I think people will definitely think you're crazy if you did.
yep, yep. I mean, look, and if people
You-
watch the TED Talk,
the-
you you're gonna feel like it might be a little crazy, but that audience was laughing, and and everybody can do it if you're open to it. And so, I'm somebody who loves to laugh. I grew up in a household where there were lots of jokes and lots of laughter, and so for me, once I got over that kind of awkward and "Oh, what the heck am I doing? This is so weird" kind of feeling, and I was laughing, it just became very natural. I loved it, participated for the full hour, and I felt so good afterwards. I mean, if you can imagine, right, when you think about some of your best memories, it's usually when you're laughing with friends, with
yeah.
family, right? And I laughed for a full hour. And so I ended up having like the best night of sleep that night. And so I also
Wow.
realized that there was more to it. You know, it wasn't just the laughter in that moment. There were positive effects for my body. And so then that got me thinking about it more, looked it up a little bit more the next day, learned a little bit about, what are some of the benefits to the body and everything with laughter. I decided to go to another class, experience it again, see if I kind of felt the same way. And at that class, the second class, the teacher announced that she was going to be doing a teacher session, like, so you could become an instructor. And so I signed up, not really actually to be an instructor, but because I just wanted to go deeper. I wanted to
Okay.
learn more about why the heck it
Sure.
worked and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened.
Wow. So is there a connection between laughter and innovation?
Absolutely. Yep. So laughter, so the way it connects, and sorry, I didn't address this, the way it connects to my
No, I'm
business.
I'm just
So
curious because it is so. I'll admit, until I uh, we were looking at you as a guest, I had not ever heard of laughter yoga. I didn't even know it was a
yep.
thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and many people, I think, are in that boat. Many people have not heard of laughter yoga. And so the way it connected to my business, so I did this as a personal journey. Laughter yoga was just for me. It was not intended to be a part of ability to engage at all. But people started asking me about it. And what is that? Like they saw that, let's say on my LinkedIn or on a bio somewhere. They
Right.
started asking about it. They were intrigued, wanted to learn more. And then, the TED Talk that got a lot more interest. And so it has become an offering at ATE. And the way that we do it is, as an energizer. So it can really help at conferences. So I've done it a lot at different conferences as like the morning kickoff or a lunchtime type of thing as an energizer. I've done it at yoga studios. I've done it for at risk youth. I've done it at high schools. I mean, it really, if you think about it, laughter is a universal language, so it really can work
It
for
is.
anybody. I've done it at corporations and whatnot. So it really runs the gamut of all types of people and walks of life. In terms of how we end up connecting it to innovation, so part of what we use laughter yoga for is simply just this idea of engaging your audience, getting people to be more in the moment and energize them.
Oh,
The
it's
other
an
connection,
icebreaker.
yes,
How
it
can
is.
you?
Yes, it is.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're not going
And
to
it's
walk out of that session with. There's going to be some breaking out of the shell just by
yeah.
participating in the process. And I would encourage people who are listening. We'll put the links in the show notes, but watch Ida's TED Talk on it and just play along.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and when you can do it with other people too, it's just so energizing. Laughter is contagious. And they say the shortest distance between two people is laughter. So, I mean, it's an amazing tool for team effectiveness, right? To get groups collaborating and working together. And the way we use it in innovation is that laughter can help open up the right side of the brain. The right side of the brain is connected to creative problem solving. And they've actually done studies that show that comedy and laughter, so not specifically laughter yoga, but that comedy and laughter can help people solve problems faster. They've done research where they'll have people try to solve a problem, see how long it takes, and then have another group that watches a short video clip, of comedy for 5 or 10 minutes, and then go and try to solve the problems, and they're able to solve the problems faster. And so there is a connection as well between laughter and innovation. And again, it's really about opening up the right side of the brain that helps us with problem solving.
Well, and I think it's one way to maybe not take ourselves so seriously, get us out of that moment, if you will. If
Absolutely.
you're always serious, I think that's a detriment to innovation. I absolutely believe that because you're locked into something, and once you're locked into something, getting out of it becomes a problem. You need something that disrupts the pattern. Something has
Yeah,
to be disruptive in the thought. So let me ask you
agree.
this: where I know you've been very generous with your time, but as a is there a parting gem of knowledge that you would like to leave everybody with? You've been wonderful, Ida. It's
No,
been
thank
a
you.
refreshing talk to hear about your journey of entrepreneurship and decision making and lateral thinking and the great work you're doing at A2E. But is there is there something that you would like to leave our entire
Yeah.
audience with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of times, and especially nowadays with a lot of the negativity that we have in the world and just such uncertain times, there's a tendency for us to get stuck sometimes, to not know what to do. And I always remind myself that every moment is a chance to change your direction in life. Your tomorrow can be completely different than today. And so if you're ever feeling stuck, I think just remember that you 100% have the ability to change the direction of your life, no matter, what age you are or what circumstances you're in. If that's your desire and you put effort behind it, you absolutely can change things at any moment. And man, what a difference a week, a month, a year can make. And so just remember that whatever you're feeling right now, and if you're feeling stuck, it's totally within your power to change that.
Ida, we look forward to having you come back sometime. Don't be a stranger here. I think your concepts are very relevant to what we do. And, part of what we do is help, we want to help people develop. Um, and really appreciate your time and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I hope that hopefully there are a few nuggets in there that will help your viewers.
I I certainly believe that will be the case.